Hi, this is Molly Shock, ACE. I'm an editor on unscripted television shows like MasterChef, Naked and Afraid, RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars, and you're listening to The Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I am a director and owner of BC Media Productions, and this is The Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. So today we're talking to Molly Shock, ACE. She is an editor for unscripted television, competition reality shows. So you can imagine the amount of footage that she needs to sift through on a daily basis. And we have quite a big discussion about how she organizes her footage and the steps to creating a story in reality television. She's worked on RuPaul's Drag Race, MasterChef, Naked and Afraid, Survivor, and countless more. And she has a lot of stories to tell and a lot of insights to help us as creatives sort of figure out how to craft stories through editing. So it's a great discussion, and you guys are going to absolutely love it. All right, let's jump in to our interview with Molly Shock, ACE. So I'm here with Molly Shock, ACE. She is an editor who specializes in unscripted television and competition reality. And we are going to get to how do these shows get edited. I can't even imagine the mass of media that you have to sift through. Molly, thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show.
I'm so flattered to have been invited. Thank you so much for having me.
I just can't even, I've been editing for a long time. It's kind of how I started. And I just can't even imagine the amount of media that you have to go through doing unscripted television and competition stuff, reality shows. It's insane. Oh, yeah. I mean, just the sheer volume of it must keep you up at night.
No, because we have union hours to protect us from that kind of thing. No, it is crazy. I mean, when I talk to my friends who do a lot of scripted work, I mean, I get, they've got dailies and they'll be like, oh my God, I've got 10 hours of dailies I have to get through today. I'm like, we have 300 hours just for this one, the 42-minute episode. Every show is different, whether it is, a shiny floor competition show like, RuPaul's Drag Race or The Voice, or whether it's a field competition show like Survivor, or a documentary style show like Deadliest Catch or Naked and Afraid. Like each show is its own beast, and there are many skilled producers, assistants who set up a structure that allow us to manage all this material. Like there's definitely a workflow that's specialized for each one, but there's a definite creative and rational thought that goes into it to make sure that we are able to get the footage we need to tell the best story.
Yeah, and I cannot wait to dive into more of that, because the workflow, I think, is the big thing. And I'm sure that our audience can learn a lot of lessons from the way that you structure your edits, no matter what they're doing, whether they're doing TV, documentary, short form, long form. I think the lessons are going to be valuable. But before we even get there, I just want to learn a little bit more about you. Just before we started recording, you sort of rattled off a few things, shows you've been on. Just tell us a little bit more about you and your experience.
Sure. Well, I've been a professional editor for over 20 years. I started off editing promos for Baywatch, and that taught me how to tell a story in 26 seconds with a 4-second tag. And it was a great proving ground. Segued into editing documentaries for History Channel, like on Nazi Gold, back when History Channel was actually about history. And then those were the kind of shows I started watching. Like in 2000, Survivor came around. I was like fascinated by, oh my God, this is the way these stories get told. The editors have got to have such amazing control over this product. Just back up a second. I went to film school to Loyola Marymount University. I got a degree in television production. I went there because I thought I wanted to be a director, but then I realized I hated being on set. I didn't like the hurry up and wait. I didn't like the, oh, we're losing the light, and just all the plates you had to keep spinning. But put me in a room, close the door, come back 12 hours later, and I can deliver something that I can, focus on and not be distracted by a lot of things and still have a tremendous amount of say in what story is being told. That was incredibly appealing to me. And from the time I left college, I knew that I wanted to be an editor. So once I discovered, in the early 2000s, when there was the big reality explosion, these are the kind of stories I want to work on. These are the kind of stories that I want to delve into, because I know as an editor, you can really manipulate, you can see what's being manipulated or what's real. And the real stuff is the most fascinating, but I love when I don't have to cut away from somebody and to prove this is real, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to tell the story.
I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you seen change in reality? Because you were kind of there, certainly Big Brother and Survivor, both kind of, I think around 2000, those came out. And it's not like they were the first reality shows ever. Certainly we had The Real World before that. And just even documentaries are kind of the reality of old time. There's just been so much change in the way that reality TV functions and how the stories are crafted. And I'd love to hear from you how have you seen this art form, I guess, change over time?
I think that it has codified more, and I mean that in a very good way. Reality, for anyone that wasn't around in the 2000s, it was the Wild West, and you could do anything. You had Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire and Kid Nation, and not that there's not value to be seen in some of these shows, but you saw people were willing to try anything because they just weren't sure, what can't we do? And then I think, as the shows evolved and you realized what kind of was more exploitative and what was true entertainment or had real value, shows like Intervention or Beyond Scared Straight, and you realized it didn't have to be the sensationalistic, sideshow. It can be that, but it can be so much more. So when I say it's codified, I always like to kind of break down that when people say reality, they're dismissing a whole type of television. Dismissing is probably an unfair thing to say, but yes, there are, like I said, there's shiny floor competition shows, where you have a studio audience and a host and contestants. There's usually a format. Somebody gets eliminated every week. There is, once you kind of know what you are, you've defined yourself. Now, as an artist, as an editor, you can kind of start pushing the boundaries of okay, how can I tell this kind of story in a more interesting way? I said, shows that are docu-follow, shows like Deadliest Catch and Naked and Afraid, where they'll just shoot the whole time and then they'll find the stories. Shows like what I call docu-soap, which would be more like Kardashians or Real Housewives, where you you have story beats that you kind of want to hit throughout the season. It's kind of like soft scripted improv. And these people are pros. They know how to deliver the line and make it feel casual. So everyone's just more savvy in what their role is in delivering these kinds of stories. So that's the change that I've seen. And then it just makes it a little bit easier for you as an editor, where before I would just kind of take anything that came at me just because I wanted to work. It just made it a little bit more, I think I really love doing the competition reality show. So I'm going to kind of just focus on that for a while. But I like dipping around because I like to be, it just exercises different muscles depending on the kind of show you work on.
What was appealing to you about the competitive side of reality?
I think those are the kind of shows I just enjoy watching. I love process. I remember as a kid watching Sesame Street, and they would have the time-lapse photos of the construction sites where you'd see the holes be dug out and then the concrete gets laid and the beams go up. I love process. So when I was on Project Runway or any of the cooking competition shows, I got that. I love making sure that as I'm, kind of picking those B-roll shots to yada yada, the time passing along, that you're not jumping around of oh wait, they're too far and decorating that cake. They shouldn't be that far along. because that's kind of a second story that you're telling us at the same time. That just makes for a richer viewing experience. But yeah, and I love Survivor. I've seen every season. I love RuPaul's Drag Race, seen every season. You know, I like the creativity. Survivor's more kind of about the human interactions and the gameplay. Yeah, I guess that's why I like it.
It's just what you just gravitated toward. Like for me, I think my two big reality shows are Big Brother and RuPaul's Drag Race. And I feel like they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
In a lot of ways, like, you know, Big Brother seems more docu-follow, like you said, even though they're not really going very far. They're just kind of there. Mm-hmm. And yes, there is a competitive nature to it. And RuPaul's Drag Race is much more of a performance. Yes. And there's definitely like beats you need to hit, and it feels more structured.
Yeah.
But I feel like they both have similar qualities in that you're falling in love with the characters. And I think a lot of that has to do with the editing.
Yeah.
Certainly you need to have dynamic characters that people like. They need to be great characters, but I think the editor can help a lot in making the audience love these characters. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. And yeah, it is character and story are the two big things. It's like, I'm jumping ahead a tiny bit, but this definitely addresses your question. When I come in to edit a show, day one, I'm usually given a string out of an act. And let's say it's act one. And the story producer has constructed, these are the beats we need to hit in this act. And a lot of the interview bites for that first pass tend to be, well, we're in the workroom today. Today, we're going to be doing this challenge. I sure hope the judge likes what I'm doing, because otherwise I'm out of here and I'm just not ready to go home yet. And that is 99% of every reality show has that bite. I've got no new information from that. And so, but I get why it's there, because you're trying to build the getting from A to B to C. So pretty much one of the first things I do when I come in is watch the string out. I'm like, okay, this is where I'm here. I need to go here, but I don't necessarily have to go in this straight line. Let's look around here. Maybe let's take the scenic path. And here's a great story about, like, you know, I almost got eliminated last week, and it would have been devastating because that was the singing competition. And that's all I am, is I'm a singing queen. So, I just don't know what my place in this competition is anymore. That's so much more interesting than just the boilerplate of today we're here to do this.
Okay, Molly, can you walk me through the process when you sit down for an edit day, you're just about to start? What is the process like? What are you handed by your producer, and how does it all begin?
So on a show like for, let's say, RuPaul's Drag Race, because
it's amazing.
Currently because it's amazing. Yes. Congratulations to, damn.
Jada Essence Hall. How dare you?
There we go. I'm sorry. I was going to go Jane to your feast. I'm like, that's not it. Anyway. So I usually walk in and fill out a lot of paperwork. And then I am given, I'm told, all right, you're going to do the runway, or you're going to do the mirror talk, or it's usually given in an act. So I will sit down, open up a bin. We're all on Avid usually, and there's a central drive system where all the footage from the entire season, and usually all the previous seasons, are located. So at any time I can go back and access footage from previous seasons, or if they've shot B-roll of, like, the things that are kind of like the stock things, like footage of the workroom or skylines to do transitions into the next day or whatever. These are all stored on massive drives. So I walk in, story producer has given me the string out of, you're going to do the mirror talk. Like, okay. I will watch that string out down. It's usually going to be about 5 minutes long, if a good story producer, because I know it's ultimately only going to be about 2 minutes. And I'll watch it down and I'll see what they thought was important. I'm like, okay. Then what I'll do is I will read all the interview transcripts of the queens that might have something to say about that particular topic. and I'll see, are they going to say anything that's more interested than that is in the string out originally? Yes, no. And then I'll just start kind of cutting and paring it down and cleaning it up and pulling out. And then you just slowly start kind of tightening it. I'll throw a track of music down. Does that evoke some kind of response in me? Nah, that's too sappy, or that's too driving. No, let's throw something else in. Who should be listening to what's being said, like in the room? I'm jumping around. I'm speaking kind of in a free form style. But like if two queens are having a conversation, and I know that this is on one level, this is the information that the audience is getting, this conversation that you are seeing. But on a second level, I now need to think, who in the workroom should be hearing this or needs to be hearing this so that they can either comment on it or react to it later. So I need to get a reaction shot of this person so it looks like they're listening. So that kind of cues the audience in knowing, oh, they have this information too. Mm. Or if I wanted to seem like they're being talked about behind their back, I'll look for a shot where they're not paying attention. So again, it's that you're giving information that they aren't hearing this. So you're always looking for those levels of subtext of, yes, here's the basic story of, I had a terrible relationship with my parents when I was growing up, but I found my tribe and life is good now.
So just to get the audience up to speed, in case they're not familiar with the show, the segment you're talking about, this is like right before they go to the runway and they're in front of the mirrors getting ready, right? Okay. Yeah. So this is kind of the moment in the show, and I'm sure every show has these moments where the characters are pretty much all together. They're talking casually and things about their personal life come up. But I think what Drag Race does really well is they incorporate the personal stories as sort of the fire that ignites these performers, and you kind of get back to those stories sometimes later in the show. So what you're telling me is the beginning of your day, a producer has already done a string out. So they've already selected clips that they like. I honestly didn't know how that works. I've never worked with a story producer. So nor have I been a story producer. So I'm actually surprised to even hear it was cut down that much. I thought you would be given much more.
Well, and I actually wanted to back this up, like even further from like when this is shot. So day one, footage is happening. Live things are being recorded on camera, and there are behind the scenes story producers, field producers, supervising producers, and they are all taking notes of what actually is happening that day. So those become field notes. Footage is done for the day. That footage is sent, and an amazing assistant editor will group all the footage together because there's 4 cameras going, and so they've got to be sunk up. There's 10 queens. They all have a mic pack. All those mics have to be sunk up. There's boom mics. There's camera mics. So if there's 10 queens in a room, there could be up to 15 mics. So those all have to be grouped, and 4 cameras. I'm currently editing MasterChef, which is 12 cameras and 4 judges, because there's a guest judge, 10 contestants, and then all that stuff again. So the assistants have a huge job that has to be done before I can do anything. And like this kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning: is there is a roadmap, there's a system in place of, let's get this footage, let's corral it together so that now when the editor comes in, they can access any of those cameras, any of those mics at any time, because maybe they see something, they see someone kind of talking off over to the side. I'll just cycle through like, oh, do I have a camera of who's talking there? Oh, good, here's a close-up. Then I'll isolate that mic and I'll listen to like, oh, what are they saying? Oh, that doesn't have anything to do with this. Okay. Oh my God, that's some amazing shade. That's going to be great for either this scene or some later scene. So you're kind of always trying to keep track of, like I said, these stories, but then you just want to keep building on what's going to make this a richer story. How many different layers can I put in here? Is it the protagonist story? Is it by protagonist, I mean the person that's talking? Is it the story of the person commenting on the protagonist? Is it so there's just all these, and that's why I love this so much, is because there's a million ways you can tell a story, and all of them are entertaining and right, but what's the one that's going to make air?
So your assistant editors are the ones that are really assembling all of the media. They're getting everything up and running. Did the assistant editors make any creative decisions?
No, unfortunately,
Okay.
no. And that's one thing I really regret about the state of our industry right now is there's a long history of an assistant editor is usually assigned to a single editor and assists that editor. Maybe it's 2 assistant editors for three editors, but there is collaboration opportunities of saying, if I am a traditional editor and a traditional assistant editor, I can say, hey, I really need some B-roll of the outside of this building. Can you scrub through the footage and find that for me? Or there's going to be a short little flashback scene. You go ahead and cut that. And there were a lot more opportunities for assistant editors to cut and to edit and to learn and to get feedback and to say, here, I did this thing. And then I, as an editor, can say, okay, that's great. Try this. This isn't working. Here's why. Give it another pass. Unfortunately, in reality, because like you said at the very beginning, we have hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage and microphones and cameras and B-roll and acquired footage that all needs to be categorized, grouped. We just need to know where it is there. And unfortunately, that does not allow for any creativity on their part or even, job crossover that I can interact with them to say, oh, here's an interesting way of grouping that camera group.
Yeah.
So
they're assembling everything. And then the story producer who already basically knows what happened because they were there on the shoot day, or at least had reviewed the footage.
Ideally, yes, they would have, but it's not always.
So did they work with the assistant editor to create that string out? No. So they just dive into the footage and do it?
Nope. Once again, the footage comes in, the assistant editors group everything, and then the assistant editors hand everything back to the to the story producers, to the editors, so that we can access. And again, it's sad because there's a real separation between our jobs because we don't allow they're not able to have much interaction with the creative side. And as demonstrated by me trying to get my audio working at the beginning of this podcast, I don't have a lot of interaction with the technical side. So it's great that you can be specialized, but unfortunate in that I have some real blind spots, even though I work on a computer for my bread and butter. So the assistant editors have got to get all the footage corralled and wrangled and categorized so that the story producer, like the editor, can come in and start accessing it. And they will go through and they will watch all the footage. Because even though the field producer could say, oh my God, the most amazing thing happened. This is going to win us an Emmy. This is the best thing that's ever happened to reality television. I can't wait to see what you do with it. Field producer or story producer goes and looks at the footage, wasn't on camera. We call that field vision. Like people remember, oh, this thing happened. But if it didn't happen on camera, it didn't happen. And sure, there's a lot of tricks and things we can do to kind of cheat it if we really, really have to make it exist. But I would so much rather spend my energies telling what did happen than fake something that we just don't have the footage of.
Yep. And that separation, I think that separation, it may be annoying for a story producer that wants to be a creative producer, but you kind of need all of those parts to get this done. And I think the lesson here is that regardless of, where you are on the totem pole as an editor, it's a team. It is definitely a team.
1,000%. It's great when you can have those moments of, I did that or I have ownership, but it is such a collaboration. And it's been very interesting, if I can just a sidebar for a second.
Yeah.
So I'm currently editing season 11 of MasterChef, which was in production when the coronavirus hit. And I edited it last season. It's a lot of the same people. It's a fantastic team. I love all my producers. I love my co-editors. Endemol produces it. They're a fantastic company to work for. And I was checking in with them when I was starting to hear these things about coronavirus. I'm like, are we going to still be able to do this? And they go, yep, we're all good. Well, then everything shut down. They went into production and then they got about half of the episodes filmed and then everything just stopped. And they still said, well, we've got our editors already with this time blocked out that they want to edit. We have half the season, so let's edit half the season. And within a week or so, they had set up a whole structure of getting us all our editing systems at home. I literally have the exact same editing system that I worked on last season, and they brought it to my house, and they gave me this lovely microphone and this headset. And I've been working from home for the past 8 weeks.
Wow.
We'll get and there's 15 of us. There's 15 editors. We're all working from home. And again, there's half dozen story producers and 3 supervising producers. We've had no interaction in person. We've got, I think, 4 assistant editors. Everything's communicated over Slack, over Box. Occasionally we'll do a Zoom staff meeting. But it's very much the same process where, like, my story producer has finished a string out. Hey, that act is ready for you on Box. I go on to Box, I download it. We all have the same media because the assistants did an amazing job getting us copies of all this footage, and everything just lines up. So I'll edit my thing, I'll hand it off, upload it. That looks great. This person's going to polish. They download it. It's tremendous and fascinating and awesome. But the point of why I was telling the story, what is missing is that interaction and collaboration. It's there sort of, but it's not the same as being able to go into the office, passing another editor in the break room and saying, "Hey, how's your episode going?" And they're like, it's kind of sucky because I can't show why these two characters are fighting and I don't know why. I'm like, oh, well, I had a big blow up in my episode. So, maybe that's what seeds it. And then we'll go and we'll talk to the story producer. Because again, everyone's there's teams usually focused, like, 3 to 4 teams, and you leapfrog like 1, 5, 9, 13, and those are your episodes. And you may not have time to pay attention to what's going on in the other ones. That going into the office and that face-to-face interaction is what allows you to really kind of keep tabs on everything.
A lot of the cinematographers we have on film episodes in blocks. So they'll do like 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes they jump around different parts of the season, but it sounds like you guys in editing aren't necessarily doing it in blocks. You may do episode 1, but then you may do episode 9. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely.
How do you maintain consistency? Because the story you're telling in episode 9 may be completely based on what happened in episode 8. And how would they even know what happened?
And again, that's why we so depend on this being a team effort. So, like I said, we have 4 or 5 story producers, and those are all assigned. Let me just do some easy math. Let's say there's 4 story producers, and each story producer is assigned to a team of 3 editors. So we have 12 editors, and we're just going to, every 4th episode, your team works on this, your team works on that, your team works on that. So you are in your little bunker. You're only focusing on your episode. Then there is a supervising producer who watches all the cuts. So as we get things done, we'll send them to the supervising producer. So they're kind of watching everything and they're like, this is falling flat, or make sure we keep this person alive because they're going to go home next episode. And this is the last chance to have them, say their funny catchphrases. So there's that supervising producer that oversees everything and gives us feedback so that we are aware of each other. Yes, ideally, we're able to, like I said, check in and watch each other's works, but we don't always have time. Now, that's a very antiseptic, idealized version of it. What really happens is I'll be on episode 3, and at 11 o'clock, I'll get a text from my producer saying, "We just got network notes back. We got all hands on deck. We need, can you take act 1 of episode 2 because we've got to get that out by time." And so, Again, we're always in each other's pockets. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the competition reality shows. It's just they're big and they're unwieldy, but it is a little bit easier. Because there is the structure of come in, challenge thing, winner, loser, challenge set up for next time. So at least you've got that framework. Unlike Naked and Afraid, they'll shoot 21 days and you have to make a 42-minute show out of 21 days. And you've got to find really clever ways to compress time, show interesting drama, but not feel like you're just jumping around. I mean, like that, it's almost a whole separate podcast to talk about docu-follow type shows than competition reality. I'm just kind of focusing on that because that's what I've been doing a lot lately.
Yeah.
But yeah, the again, long-winded answer is there's a supervising producer that keeps track of all that stuff. Once a show is locked, quote unquote, there's usually one or two editors that is considered a finishing editor. I was a finishing editor last season, where one editor makes a final pass at the whole thing, make sure that everything sounds right, the sound effects are right, the speed ramps don't feel out of place, that it feels like it's still coming from one voice.
Yeah.
And again, some people may find that stifling in that you're trying to make it look like everything else, but that's kind of part of the job. You're branding, like,
of course.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to always know what show you're watching. Otherwise, what are you watching? Like, that makes sense.
Well, it's like I remember I just wrapped RuPaul's Drag Race All-Star last year when I came over to MasterChef, and it took me a day to remember, I don't have to put a sound effect and a hit and a shing on every single thing. Because like we do that very little on MasterChef, and we did it constantly. And it's fun.
Yeah.
I loved editing Drag Race. I was one of the lead editors on that for All Stars. And what's great about Drag Race is that, my God, the queens give the best sound bites, but they'll say their funny lines and they're funny, but unless you put them in context of it being juxtaposed with what's happening in the reality, that's when you're really building the jokes, or you add the sound effects or the eye roll or the shady rattlesnake sound effect.
Yeah.
But you are literally making the jokes. They're giving you all the great material to do it. But otherwise, it's like, if a tree falls in the woods, it was a drag queen laugh.
Well, what I love about that show is that there's no villains. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, there's going to be the shady queens and the ones that are, but you guys, you edit all of these people really well, and it seems like you're aware that you're helping them build their brand.
1,000%. I mean, there's great affection for the contestants. I mean, I think this goes back. I used to edit A&E biographies, and I would get so invested in the stories and the people, and that's kind of, I was editing A&E biographies kind of when reality came along, and I thought, this is kind of like doing a biography. You have a bit of reality and then a talking head. But I want the audience to fall in love with these people. Now, there are certain queens that I could not get off my screen fast enough. I just had no time for. Sometimes people would say, you gave them a bad edit. I'm like, sometimes I gave them a really good edit, and I could have made them look so much worse. But I don't, that's not what the show is about. The show is not about piling onto somebody.
Well, there's something very specific about season 12 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and whether you guys have seen it or not that are listening, I think this still applies. There was a contestant, Sherry Pie, that got disqualified, but got very far in the competition. So how do you balance giving them the airtime they need to tell the story, but also not making them a featured character? Because you really couldn't, because a statement was made early on in the season that Sherry Pie would not appear at the finale. And this is, this certainly, this goes down in Drag Race history as, some major scandal that people are going to be talking about forever. But this is an enormous editing challenge. And I'd love to hear from your perspective. How do you handle, and I'm sure this isn't the only show that this happened to, but how do you handle contestants that are disqualified but are still very much part of the competition?
I mean, I did not work on season 12. I have a lot of friends who did, and I was in contact with them, and I know that they basically had to go back into re-editing to retool, because they had already they shot the season last summer. So the footage has been in the can forever. So you've got all that time to, oh, here are my story arcs. And, oh, won't this be great to highlight, this funny thing that Sherry Pie did.
Yeah.
But the scandal didn't really break until after January or February or so. But at that point, a lot of the season was already in the can. I don't know how much, but there was obviously a decision made for higher up of like, we're going to minimize it. And there's going to be times when we can't just ignore her because she wins the challenge, or she's in the bottom and has to lip sync, or whatever it is. Her very presence is part of the story, so she can't be completely eliminated. But as I started this whole conversation with you off with, is that's the magic of having hundreds of hours of footage, is you can do anything you want. I certainly know that there are, there's people you want to make bigger presences on shows because they're entertaining.
Yeah.
But there are times when it's like, oh, it's too much of this person. So all those sit-down interviews that are done with producers, every single contestant is always asked the same general questions of, what happened to you today? What happened in the workroom? How did you feel about that? And then you get, like I said, those boilerplate, boring bites. A good queen can make that a lot more interesting. Sometimes, unfortunately, you're like, God, I just got to give this queen some presence, but they just don't really deliver sound bites. So you'll see them get kind of the heavy lifting bites just to keep them present. But like I said, we can raise or lower somebody's profile any way we want, but it's ultimately got to make sense to the viewer. Like if you're watching a show and I've completely cut out this one character because I didn't like them or whatever, and then they win, Survivor, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then you are left unsatisfied as a viewer. It's like a magic trick. Like you've got to, you can do anything you want during the season, but at the end, you have to explain how you did the trick. And if that doesn't make sense, again, it's very unsatisfying and less likely that they'll come back and watch.
Do you feel that there's a sense of responsibility to, I guess, maybe like fairness in a way? I mean, RuPaul's Drag Race probably isn't the best example because it's such a spectacle and so crazy, but there's got to be other shows that you worked on that has to be a little bit more true to what actually happened. And as editor, you really are responsible for crafting the story.
Absolutely. And like I said, as I'm working on an act, like very easy example on MasterChef, this episode I've been working on, I cut the first act, which is they come in, they get the challenge, they meet the guest judge, they go, and your time starts now. They go, they get their ingredients. Maybe we kind of hear from one or two of them of what they're making, and then the judges come out to check in on them and, what? I can't believe you're putting sardines on this. You're going to go home. Act out. So as I'll build that, and it might be like an 8 to 10 minute act, which is pretty hefty, and you that takes you a week or two to cut. So you're just kind of slow, it's like a whale. You just eat it one bite at a time. So once you're down here, you've kind of forgotten what you've done here. So then you constantly go back and are watching. And as you're now able to watch it as an edited piece and as a viewer would at home, you're like, oh, I've got a lot of reaction shots of that person. Oh, I haven't seen this person. Let me swap those out. So you're just constantly retooling of making sure that you see everybody. I know that the audience is very savvy, and I try very hard to put in, like if I'm going to, if I'm going to put in a reaction shot of somebody, like if Gordon says, and if you can't do that, you're going home tonight. There's usually a cutaway to a contestant with a boom, boom, boom sound. The one level of thinking is like, if the person you cut to is the actual person, the audience is going to think, oh, that person's going to go home. But then you think, they wouldn't show the person that's going home. It's like that whole logic puzzle in Princess Bride. Like, well, because you know that, then I'm going to do this. But because you know this, then I'm going to do that. So you're constantly trying to put in a reaction shot that makes sense. But is it because they're the winner? Is it because they're going to go home? Is it because I haven't seen from you in a while and I want to keep you alive? Is it because you have a great reaction? I'm very aware that the audience knows a lot of how this sausage gets made. And so I don't ever want to, I don't want them to know from what I've done that they know how it's going to end. But yet again, it still has to make sense of why I showed that person at that time. So it's a constant balance. And sometimes, I'll get a network note that says, "Oh, I really want to see this person here." Okay, your pay grade's higher than mine. You win.
Exactly.
So.
We've got a question from one of our listeners, SatKSax19 on Instagram. How do you come up with innovative ways to keep people's attention?
I actually try just to tell a good story. I mean, you saw the evolution of Flash and Bang. I mean, once Avid came along, and Avid's fantastic, and you've got Sapphire, and you've got the Super Tease stuff at the beginning with all the whip pans and zooms and lens flares. That stuff's cool to look at, but you can't have a whole show on that. So the only thing I know how to do is just to tell a good story and hope that you are compelled by these characters, that I've made them, that you feel a connection with them for some reason, whether you love them or hate them, that you'll just keep watching. So it's not that I'm finding new ways. It's just constantly checking in with myself of do I care what's happening to this person?
And one more question here from Twitter, David Ray, specific to Drag Race, and not really an editing question, but he wants to know, what's the shooting schedule usually like? Do you have any information about that?
I guess it's usually about a month, give or take, depending on how many queens are there. Usually they will film several days in a row, take a break, because you sometimes they'll need days off, or union crews, you can't work more than 6 days in a row without incurring huge penalties. And plus, people just need breaks. It's not. I mean, the reason unions are there to protect you is because people need breaks. We're not machines. It's like if you have a car that can go 120 miles per hour, it's not the best thing for the car to just hold that pedal down, drive at 120 miles an hour as long as you can consistently. You need to take breaks and pace yourself. So anyway, but back to the shooting schedule. Yeah, usually they're about a month, give or take. I said Naked and Afraid is anywhere from if they crap out early, 1 to 21 days of shooting. Deadliest Catch, I believe the season is a month or two, and they'll film that whole time and then come back and go, okay, where are our stories? And then they'll kind of play with time to say when stuff happened. Shows like The Voice, they'll do all their cattle calls. They'll take several weekends, and they'll shoot, auditions and, actually, I don't know if The Voice does that, but American Idol will go out and do their audition shows. And then they'll come and shoot for a week in Hollywood Week. And then it's the weekly live shows. And each of those kinds of episodes have different challenges and schedules. So
we talked quite a bit about competition reality shows, and that's what you've been focusing quite a bit on. But I do want to take our last few minutes and discuss the more docu-follow shows, as you're calling them, and just talk to us, give us a little bit of insight into how the editing process is for those, something where you're not necessarily waiting for the whole season to finish before you start editing. Can you point to a show that you've worked on that's sort of in that vein, and tell us a little bit about the workflow?
Sure. I think 2 summers ago was when I was working on Naked and Afraid. And again, fantastic company, fantastic experience, because they just really know what they're doing. And every Monday we would come in, we would have a production meeting where our executive producer would have all the editors and story producers and the people that did all the roto and blur and assistant editors, and just kind of give a thumbnail John is out in Colombia right now, and they're getting ready to start our twosome here. Such and such tapped out, but so we're editing early episodes while they're filming, but we would get live updates of oh my God, they had a lightning strike. You're not going to believe this. And then, a couple weeks later, they come back, and now we're going to start shaping that footage. So it's a really fun experience because we kind of get to hear about it in real time. They come back, they take a week or so to kind of decompress and see what they got. And the thing I really, really like about working for Naked and Afraid is that, unlike I said, MasterChef, we can have up to 15 editors and we're all in each other's pockets. Naked and Afraid, it's just you and maybe a junior editor for a week or so, or a month or so, just to kind of get it into shape.
Wow.
But you were the only, it's a rare thing and a real privilege.
Why do you think that is for that show?
I think they understand that, if you've got 21 days of footage, there's too much to keep track of. Because if, let's say we split it and I'm paying attention to the fact that, like, oh my God, the fact that they were getting stalked by leopards, that's going to be a huge story. And then you realize it never pays off in the back half. But I've spent all this time building my story. And if I had been looking at the entire thing, I could go, I'm just going to drop that storyline and let's focus on the flash flood instead, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's very collaborative and I love it. Because again, the story producer I'll come in on day one and they will have a bulletin board with a bunch of scene cards, and they'll say, okay, this is what happens in Act 1. This is what happens in Act 2. And I can look at it usually and go, ooh, that's a lot of scenes. I don't think we're going to have time to do all those. Because while it would be nice to be able to edit all the footage and have a 2-hour in-depth piece of what happened, I got 42 minutes to tell this story. And I need to have a cut done in a month. And I don't have the luxury of editing everything just to try it. And so there's a lot of spitballing back and forth of like, okay, well, this happened on day 1. And then this also happened on day 3. Can we ignore the thing that happened on day 1 and then just have it all play in day 3 and still have that emotion? And maybe there's a little bit of footage or a soundbite that we'll steal from day 1 that still addresses what happened on day 3. But we don't have to show both of these things. So again, there's a lot of collaboration and spitballing and moving parts. I edited an episode I absolutely loved. I love the two survivalists. I actually became friends with Facebook friends with them because they were such lovely people. But they just were starving. They literally had no food for 21 days, and they both made it the full time. And there was this scene where a rat trap had failed, and they were bummed about that. And then there was a scene where a fish trap, they spent days making it washed away. And the defeat on the woman's face once that washed away, it was so powerful and so raw and so great. I definitely wanted to use that footage. But we didn't have time to show them making this fish trap. We'd built this whole thing about the rat trap. And so I had to make it look like once they realized the rat trap didn't work, cut ahead 3 days. And I was able to make it feel like her emotional breakdown was because of this event, not the other.
Wow.
So I'm still telling the emotional truth of the story, but just not in the chronological, documented order that it happened. But then you're dealing with challenges like time of day. Where are they in the jungle? What's the lighting like? What's the weather like? And so it was very tricky to geographically place them so it still felt like this could be real.
In our last couple of minutes, I want to talk about this organization, EIPMA, Entertainment Industry Professionals Mentoring Alliance. This is something that you're
so kind.
It's something that you're deeply involved in. I didn't know anything about it, but now looking it up at EIPMA.org, it's a national organization of experienced working professionals offering career guidance for individuals seeking craft and technical careers in the entertainment industry. And isn't that just such a great cause? And I mean, that is what Go Creative Show is really all about. And I'm so glad to have heard about this through you.
So kind to bring it up.
I just want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience what this is and how they can get involved, either as being mentors or being mentees.
Yeah. Well, you're very kind to bring it up. It's a brand new organization. We're still getting our feet under us. We're only about 2 years old. The spark to create IPMA was there was a gentleman named Paul Rodriguez, who passed away a number of years ago, who was a very kind and generous mentor personality in the industry. And when he passed, the Motion Picture Sound Engineers, MPSE, wanted to create some kind of thing in his memory, but just like a scholarship just didn't seem big enough. And as I talked earlier, there aren't as many opportunities for the editor, assistant editor mentorship to really happen as it does in a traditional way. And so, because everyone's so caught up with technology, or we're more isolated because we're working remotely. And so MPSE decided to partner with American Cinema Editors, ACE, and several other professional organizations. Avid is part of it. The Recording Academy, who does the Grammys, is the part of it. The Hollywood HPA, Hollywood Producers Association. Anyway, we formed this coalition of these organizations, which is specifically not the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild, the Producers Guild, not to exclude them, but it's just, we are a very passionate, creative group of people that a lot of people don't even realize that these are jobs that you can pursue, let alone find incredible career satisfaction, reward, personal satisfaction in. So we're finding ways to reach out to colleges, to high school students, to let them know that we exist. And whether that is through, we just started doing this thing. We did it last month and it came out fantastic. It's basically speed mentoring, like speed dating, where we're reaching out to high schools or colleges where somebody there at the college will set up 20 students that are interested and then partner with IPMA. And we encourage anyone that wants to maybe be involved. We just have this whole database of people and we say, hey, who's available? And you just need an hour on this date, and then we'll put them together. And these 20 college students can spend an hour just spending, checking in with 8 professional people and just asking them questions, or again, learning about their industry. So yeah, IPMA we're very new, and we are very happy that we're finding new ways to reach the community, but we're also need people that would be interested in being a mentor to kind of join our database. So we are just IPMA really prides up. We are a conduit for mentors to find mentees and vice versa, because we do not want to impose on other organizations. They have their own mentorship programs and internship programs. We're not trying to supersede that. We're just trying to say, did you know that you could maybe, talk to this person or enter this festival?
And do you have to come through a college structure, or can just an individual?
Nope.
Okay.
An individual. I mean, we're trying to make sure that everybody is. We're trying to make sure that we're very new, but we're trying to protect ourselves in that, it's not just some random person off the street, and that's more disparaging than I mean it to sound. There needs to be some kind of voucher or representation of who this is, but we do want to work, people that are, veterans, or people that decided to do late in life career changes.
Yeah.
There's definitely room for that. I mean, all of us just want to share information. We want to give back. We want to make the future of our industry stronger by sharing this information. That's why I'm very appreciative of you asking me to be on this podcast and ramble on various things.
It's amazing how many people have reached out to me over the past couple of months since COVID-19 really disrupted everything, that are just sort of seeing what's out there. I've been a waitress for 20 years. I've always wanted to do film production and media production. I haven't worked in 2 months, and how do you get involved in this new industry? I hear those stories. Yeah. I can't really offer any help beyond my little bubble here in Boston, but I think there's a lot of people that are taking this time to reignite passions that they've had. And if those passions are in the entertainment industry and you can't afford or don't have the time to go to a film school, there needs to be ways to learn. And I think that's what I love so much about what you're doing with IPMA. And I think our audience here, certainly, there's got to be some people here that could be mentors for you. And I really want to encourage our audience to look more into this at eipma.org and reach out. If you're interested in being a mentor, or if you're interested in having a mentor, it's a new organization, and I want it to be thriving. I want this to be successful, because this is what...
Thank you so much, yeah.
I think we can here at Go Creative Show could really make a difference in helping you.
I really appreciate that. And that's the thing that's been very exciting, like I said, about this speed dating thing is because like I said, we're still figuring it out. At first, we were just thinking, oh, we'll go and do panels locally here in Los Angeles at high schools. But then we're like, well, what about that kid in, Maquoketa, Iowa that, just doesn't have any kind of opportunity to interact with somebody in a profession. So we talent can come from anywhere. And I don't think that geography should be a limitation on you pursuing dreams or getting information.
I love it. Well, Molly Schock, ACE, thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show and sharing your experiences and for your work with IPMA.
Thank you so much. You're very kind, and I appreciate you reaching out. And I'm terrible at Twitter, but I will check it out on occasion. So if people want to find me there, I'm just Molly Schock at whatever Twitter.
So just at Molly Schock. There you go.
Yeah. So,
at Molly Schock, MOLLYSHOCK. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes for you guys as well. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for being on.
Ben, thank you so very much for all you guys do.
I want to thank Molly Schock, ACE, for coming on Go Creative Show and sharing her experiences. I'm sure you'll never watch another reality show again the same way. Now that you know what goes on behind the scenes, you're going to appreciate every one of those scenes and appreciate the amount of time being put in to review all these clips. It's a mountain of material, and I don't know how these guys do it. But I thank Molly for coming on and giving us a little bit of insight. I also want to thank Matt Russell for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find him at gainstructure.com and also on Twitter at gainstructure. And of course, our producer, Connor Crosby, for putting it all together behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com and on Twitter at ignitionvisuals. Of course, you can find me at Ben Consoli on Instagram and Twitter. And I've been posting a lot on Instagram of the work that I'm doing. Stuff that I'm doing with my remote production techniques, which I'll be talking about very soon. And of course, shooting throughout COVID-19. We've been doing it. You got to do it a little different, but we've been doing it. And you can too. We'll be talking about that in a later episode. And of course, all things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com for the show notes from this episode and all previous episodes. And of course, I want to thank all of you for listening to the show and sharing it and becoming a member of this Go Creative Show family. So please support our sponsors, HostLab and MZ, Education for Creatives. Without those people, the show wouldn't exist. So please support those that support us. And we'll continue bringing this show week after week. And see you next time on another episode of The Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.